All right, let's get this deep dive going. Today, we're looking at something with, well, potentially huge implications for the Indian financial markets. That's the U.S. Fed's interest rate decision, which is coming up tomorrow. We're going to unpack what everybody's expecting.
Yeah, exactly. So we're diving into those likely scenarios. What are the things we should all have our eyes on? Really want to try to paint a clear picture of like what this all could mean, for India, specifically for the Indian economy.
Okay, so if I'm getting this right, the most likely scenario, at least according to what we're seeing, is that the Fed kind of just like stays put, holds the rates where they are. What's the initial reaction in India, you think, if that happens?
Well, I think if they hold steady, you're probably going to see a pretty calm response from India.
Hmm.
Maybe even a little bit of a positive reaction. Like it's almost like dodging a bullet, right? Like a sigh of relief.
Relief, yeah.
Exactly. That allows India to keep its attention where it needs to be, which is, on its domestic economic situation.
Yeah.
And that could encourage, more investment, things like that.
So there is this like relief aspect to it, but our source also mentions that like even if rates stay the same, if the Fed has like this what they call a hawkish tone, it could still freak people out. So how does that work? Like if nothing actually changes, how can their just like words, I guess,
Yeah.
have a negative impact?
Right. It's all about like the signaling, this idea of forward guidance. A hawkish tone basically tells everyone, hey, we're still worried about inflation and we're probably going to raise rates, sometime down the road. So even if there's not an immediate hike, investors start thinking, okay, things are going to get tighter. Maybe I should be a little more careful. And that can shift the whole mood, the market sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like telegraphing their punches almost, like getting
Uh,
people ready for it. So, okay, what if the Fed throws us a curveball, right? What if they actually do raise rates? What's the worst case scenario potentially for India?
So a rate hike, especially one that people aren't really expecting, would almost definitely lead to some negative feelings, I think, in the Indian markets. Think about it.
Yeah.
Higher rates in the U.S. make investments over there look a little bit more appealing, right?
Makes sense.
So you could see some capital flowing out of, emerging markets, including India.
Yeah.
And that has a ripple effect. It can weaken the Indian rupee. It can raise concerns about, global growth overall.
Right, because everything's so connected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those concerns, obviously, they have implications for India as well.
Yeah, nobody wants that. Okay, now let's flip the script. Our source says a rate cut's like super unlikely. But let's just play pretend. If that miracle happens, what kind of like boost could we potentially be looking at in India?
Oh, a rate cut, especially if it comes out of nowhere, that would probably be like a huge injection of optimism, I'd say. Imagine like suddenly there's a lot more money available globally.
Right.
You often see a weaker U.S. dollar after a rate cut,
Right.
which can actually be really good for emerging economies. And just overall, you get this boost to global confidence. People are more willing to take risks. It's a good feeling.
Okay, so it sounds like steady is okay, up is risky, down is a party.
Pretty much. Yeah.
But, obviously it's not just about the decision itself, it's about how they communicate it, right? So what are the key things that we really need to be paying attention to when the Fed makes their announcement tomorrow?
Yeah, yeah. The source is spot on when they say those forward-looking statements from the Fed are absolutely key. So first we got the dot plot.
Yeah.
Check out those economic projections. That's where you see like visually where each member of the Fed thinks interest rates are headed. It's really interesting. And then of course, pay close attention to like how they talk about inflation. Are they sounding, more worried, less worried? What are the vibes?
Right, right. The vibes are key. Okay, and then there's the press conference, the big one with Powell. Why is it so important to like dissect every word he says?
So Powell's press conference, it's where he kind of like fills in the blanks, gives us that extra context. He can talk about like why the Fed made the decision they did, address anything that the market's freaking out about, really clarify like what they're thinking, what they're planning to do in the future. And believe me, his words, they can move markets. They can affect how investors feel globally, which in turn has a direct impact on India.
So I guess the big takeaway here is, yeah, the headlines tomorrow are going to be all about like, did they raise rates? Did they not? But the real story, especially for India, is in those like subtle details. Like you said, the dot plot, the inflation talk, and just everything Powell says, basically.
100%. I think this situation really shows you just how connected global finance really is.
It's global. Yeah.
A decision made in the U.S. can send ripples all the way to India.
Makes you think, huh? Like, what other events happening, who knows where in the world could have a similar, like, outsized effect on India? Something to think about.